Hello, I am so glad you have chosen to join us today for this webinar that addresses the high quality pre-kindergarten component of student progress monitoring. My name is Tamala Olsby, and I am an education specialist within the Early Childhood Education Division of the Texas Education Agency. The webinar today is an abbreviated version of the existing webinar on the same subject that's available on TEA's website. And please note there is a copy of the slide deck in the control panel of this webinar. This next slide shows us what we will attempt to go over today. We will briefly go over an overview of the high quality pre-kindergarten components that are referenced in HB3. And then we will specifically look at student progress monitoring. We'll look at what's in statute, what's in commissioner's rule, what does it mean? We will look through some approved assessment tools and then briefly look at any relevant TAA correspondence. And we'll end our time together looking at resources and some support. So let's briefly look at all of the high quality components that are referenced in HB3. This slide lists all of them: curriculum, student progress monitoring, teacher qualification, teacher-student ratio, family engagement, program evaluation, and data reporting. These are the high-quality components that are referenced in HB3, and of course today we are looking specifically at student progress monitoring. All of the information contained within this webinar can be found in one of the three sources that are listed on this slide. And you'll notice there is a reference to statute and a reference to the commissioner's rule and to HB3 itself. Please also note that the high quality pre-kindergarten components are applicable to all programs, districts, open enrollment charters, and districts of innovation that serve eligible 4-year-old students using foundation school program funding. And you will note here on the slide that there are some statute references in case you are wondering, wanting to see that in statute. So here we go. Let's focus on student progress monitoring. What are those requirements? And before we get started, I wanted you to know that for the purposes of this presentation, we may use the word student progress monitoring and we may use the word assessment, and those two terms are going to be used interchangeably. They have the same meaning for this webinar. This slide articulates what is in statute regarding student progress monitoring for pre-kindergarten programs serving eligible 4-year-old students. So you will see in the first reference that the district is selecting and implementing a curriculum that measures the progress of students in meeting the learning outcomes. In the next reference in statute, it says that the district shall select and implement appropriate methods for evaluating the district's classes by measuring student progress. It does say here that a school district can administer a diagnostic assessment to students, but may not administer a state standardized assessment instrument. And then lastly, it says that the assessment instrument that is administered must be selected from a list of appropriate pre-kindergarten assessments instruments identified from the commissioner. And this is, point C is the one that is new for HB3. So what is in commissioner's rule? In the commissioner's rule, it says that districts shall measure the progress of each student in meeting the Texas pre-kindergarten guidelines that were updated in 2015 using a progress monitoring tool included on the commissioner's list. And it must measure these 5 developmental domains. They include health and wellness, language and communication, emergent literacy reading, emergent literacy writing, and mathematics. So that is a lot in statute and a lot in commissioner's rules. So what really does all this mean? Well, student progress monitoring for eligible 4-year-old students is mandatory. That's the first thing. The second thing is that it is mandatory that districts use a tool from the commissioner's list of approved pre-kindergarten assessment instruments for their eligible 4-year-olds. And lastly, whatever the tool is, it must measure these 5 developmental domains: health and wellness, language and communication, early emergent literacy reading, emergent literacy writing, and mathematics. So let's take a look at the commissioner's list of approved pre-kindergarten instruments. This slide shows you one of the pages of that list, and it is effective, the current list is effective through 2021 school year. So I want to go over the columns here so that you get a firm understanding about what the commissioner's list contains. You'll see on the left, it lists the student progress monitoring tools that have been approved. The second column gives you the publisher of the tool. The third column gives you the cost per student, and remember it says approximate. The fourth column gives you the format, so it will tell you whether it's a paper and pencil assessment or whether it is web-based, or it could be both. The fifth column tells you how you administrate the tool. So is it a direct assessment that a teacher does with each individual student, or are there some observations? Do you need to have artifacts to back up the tool? And in this column, that shows each of those. The next column shows the feasibility of use, and the higher the feasibility, the easier the tool is to administrate. So if it's low, that means that the assessment tool is a little more difficult to implement. And then the next column shows you what languages the tool is approved in. And most of them include English and Spanish, but there are some differences on the bottom of the list, as you will see. And then the last 5 columns show you what developmental domains that particular assessment tool addresses. And what you want to see is 5 check marks all the way across, because that means it addresses all 5 of the developmental domains that are required. Remember, some of the tools, look on the bottom of the slide, do not address or cover all 5 developmental domains. You may still use those tools. They are on the approved list, but you would have to use an additional tool to cover the developmental domains that are missing. And so there are districts that use actually 2 different tools. But through the use of 2 tools, they are covering all 5 developmental domains, which means they are meeting their requirements. Every fall, a TAA, or to the administrator addressed correspondence, is sent out to all the superintendents. This past year, it was sent out on October 10th of 2019. And in this correspondence, it gives LEAs information regarding pre-kindergarten and kindergarten assessments. And so it will give you deadlines, instructions for uploading the data into the early childhood data system. It will give you conditions for using an alternative assessment form. Now, I will say there that if you are serving eligible 4-year-olds, this used to be allowed, but it is no longer allowed after during this school year. HB3 took that alternative assessment away from eligible 4-year-old students. Remember, eligible 4-year-old students must be assessed using a tool off of the commissioner's list. So districts do not have the option of using an alternative assessment with eligible 4-year-old students. And lastly, the to the administrator addressed correspondence will give instructions about how long the assessment data has to be retained within the local LEA. So these are very important correspondences. And if you haven't been used to looking at those, remember they always come out in the early fall. You want to be checking those out. And if you'll notice, there is a link to the one that it was released on October 10th, and there's a link there so you can get to it rather quickly. All right, we've gone over what is required, how you meet those requirements, and now we want to look at some resources and support that may assist you in your compliance. The Early Childhood Education Division of TEA is always ready and willing to support your efforts. So this slide gives you the website address and also the email support. Please do not hesitate to visit our website and to contact us if it is needed. This slide shows some additional assistance. There is a link there to the 2017-2021 Commissioners List. There is a link to some frequently asked questions that are specific to student progress monitoring. There is a link there to the Children's Learning Institute. They have a myriad of resources that not only are curriculum related, but also student progress monitoring related, how to use the data, et cetera, et cetera. So you will definitely want to visit their website. And then last but not least is a link to the Education Service Centers, and they also are always willing to assist you. For further guidance in data reporting, please refer to the webinar covering data reporting. It will give you more information about what specific pre-kindergarten data is required to be uploaded into ECDS. We're going to end our time together by looking at a quote. This quote is from Charles Babbage, and it says, "Errors using inadequate data are much less than those using no data at all." Using student progress monitoring data to inform classroom instruction is a great way to build the quality of our pre-kindergarten programs in Texas. Please be reminded there is a longer version of this webinar it goes into much more detail, and it is available on TEA's website. Thank you for joining us today.